for us today. It's drive time, and Scotland's chief law officer said it wouldn't be in the public interest to prosecute users of drug consumption rooms for simple possession offences. Now, this move could help pave the way for such facilities to be established despite opposition from Westminster. Drugs law is reserved to the UK government, but Scotland has some leeway in setting its own prosecution rules. The Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain KC said she would be prepared to publish such a policy if she was asked to do so. Dr. Nick McCarroll is a legal expert from Glasgow Caledonian University. Dr. Nick, hello.
Hi, John.
Can we take this line by line? So Scotland's chief law officer said it would not be in the public interest to prosecute users of drug consumption rooms for simple possession offences. It's to do with possession, this, isn't it?
Yes. Possession is one of the criminal offences that can be committed under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, which is the UK-wide legislation that regulates drug use and criminalises a whole number of drugs which are listed in the legislation itself. Possession, as the Dorothy Bain has stated, would not be in the public interest. And that's a key phrase, because the Lord Advocate has to make a decision on prosecuting crimes. One of the decisions is whether it is the public interest. So in a situation where somebody is using drugs for their own use in a harm reduction setting, the Lord Advocate has made the judgment call that in terms of possession, there's no public interest in prosecuting that. However, that's only part of the story as regards criminal prosecution under the drugs legislation. Obviously, supplying drugs is a criminal offence. Drug dealers are criminalised, and there's no question that any of this change would alter that. So there can be no question of these drugs being supplied to users in this setting. The third area, though, which is the most significant, and one which the Lord Advocate has been silent on, and one which I note the police are more circumspect on, is about administering drugs. And what that essentially means is a criminal offence to administer an illegal drug to someone. So if you injected someone with heroin, which is an illegal substance under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, that's a criminal offence because you're administering that drug to them. So the question that arises, which I don't think has been settled yet, is could this setup avoid that issue of making it easy administering someone to take the drug? Now, there's no question that they're saying they're going to give people drugs, but if you supply an environment to someone with a bed, cleaning facilities, etc., is that helping them administer an illegal drug? Now, that's why there's a grey area in terms of that, because the UK could say, and I think they have said, there's still lots of crimes being committed. And Police Scotland's statement is more circumspect because they say the law hasn't changed, so they reserve their right to prosecute. So I think that's the difficulty, and it's why it would be clearer if there was a pilot scheme that would allow the Scottish Government to support that.
Thank you. You've made this really clear. So it's to do with possession, supply and administering.
Those are the three elements of the Misuse of Drugs Act.
And at the moment, the mystery is administering. Are you saying that?
Yes, I would say that, because supply, there's no question of that. Yeah. Administering is the area. There's a famous case outside of the Misuse of Drugs Act, but you may remember in the late 70s, early 80s in Scotland, there were glue sniffing kits that were sold by corner shops, selling glue, crisp bags, elastic bands to people who wanted to sniff glue. Now, none of those substances themselves were illegal to sell to the people. There was no age limit then on glue, for example. But to sell them all together, that was seen as a crime because there was a knowledge that those were going to be used to cause harm to people. So if you're talking about administering something that's going to cause somebody harm under an illegal drug, that's the issue. Now, interestingly, the exemption to that is hypodermic needles, and they are allowed to be supplied, and we have a system of needle exchanges across Scotland that's utilised, and that was introduced
that's within the law then, to supply a needle.
Supplying needles within the law. But so needle exchanges, in fact, I think there's even vending machines in some homeless centres that change needles. But to actually oversee somebody using a drug becomes something different. It becomes a grey area about whether you're just watching them or if you're helping them administer that substance. And that is the problem with it in terms of the law. The other issue I would say is, as the Lord Advocate has made clear, that this is not a crime. It's not public interest to prosecute the crime of possession when somebody's in this setting. And it's not a pilot scheme. Really, there's nothing to stop lots of drug use centres being set up across Scotland if people wanted to, like Peter Crichton has done in Glasgow. Because what she's saying is in that setting there'll be no criminal prosecution. Now, I don't think that's what the Scottish Government want. I think they want a pilot. But if there is no pilot in cooperation with the UK, who, remember, administer the drugs laws, then you could get a scenario where you've got a whole number of these springing up. And
because of this recent statement?
Yeah, and the Lord Advocate said she won't prosecute that.
Right. I mean, when it comes to the argy-bargy who's in charge, can the UK government stop this? Can they?
No, I would say not easily, because it doesn't require a change to the law. So they don't need to pass a legislation or even delegated legislation like regulations to do this. So all the things that we've seen in the past few years of the UK government intervening on legislation can't happen on that way. And obviously, they can't control the police. In fact, the Lord Advocate can't control the police in terms of who they arrest. The Lord Advocate has a say in prosecuting them, but not in directing them in this setting. So the UK government would have problems doing it, but I think the Scottish government also have problems when there is this lack of clarity, particularly on administration.
Are you suggesting the police have a role here, where the police have to come out and say, yes, OK, we buy into this?
Well, the police have said that, haven't said that. They've said that the law has not changed and that they
What does that mean?
For
them,
the law hasn't changed for them. So the Misuse of Drugs Act hasn't been amended. What has been changed is the prosecution decision of the Lord Advocate. So the police.
And how does that affect policing?
Well, the police have a discretion in terms of arresting anyone, but they have to arrest someone if they think they're breaking the criminal law. Now, they are breaking the criminal law if you take heroin, but the Lord Advocate has said that it's not in the public interest to prosecute them. So one of the factors that the police might think of when they're arresting somebody is, well, this person has only got heroin on them for their own use, so I'm not going to arrest them. That's my discretion that's being exercised in that way. So that's a factor. However, if the police thought that something else was going on within that premises, even something as minor, and the last Lord Advocate actually mentioned this, if somebody was smoking a cigarette in one of these facilities, that would be a criminal offence under the tobacco laws that we have in Scotland. Now, so to not monitor any of that, and I think the Lord Advocate said something like this isn't a green light for anything goes sort of set up in this one area. And the police, I think, will be aggravated a little bit of not knowing exactly what's going on. And in fact, when the Peter Crichton was using his one in Glasgow, the reason that it was stopped initially was the police wanted to search it. They wanted to see what was going on inside it, and he refused. And they arrested him for that. Now, he kept going on after that, but it shows to me that there's a tension there about Police Scotland in this area, particularly when it's not an official pilot.
Before you go, I sense that you studied this a long time, given that you've got the case law to do with glue sniffing, and you'll have followed this story and you'll lecture on this. Do you think we're a step closer now to legalising some drug taking? Well,
legalising is a big step, because legalising, I think, would look at that third aspect of that I was talking about in terms of supplying drugs, and there's no question of that from the Scottish Government, from Glasgow Council, from the UK Government, obviously. However, I do think what a positive thing is I'm a law lecturer, but I think drugs use shouldn't really be just about law. It should be about dealing with a public health crisis, which we did during the HIV crisis in the 80s, which is when we thought needle exchanges were important to do because it was stopping a disease spreading. So I think we have moved to that area, but I do think amongst mainstream politicians, there's still a major problem in the rhetoric around drug use and the use of criminal law with that.
Dr. Nick McCarroll, thank you very much indeed. And the UK government have said that through the Home Office, a spokesperson said to us, there's no safe way to take illegal drugs which devastate lives, ruin families and damage communities, and we've no plans to consider this. We continue to share learnings from Project ADA with the Scottish Government and exchange insights from initiatives aimed at addressing drug use. We welcome these ongoing discussions, and the Lord Advocate, in a statement, she added, it does not amount to an exclusion zone whereby a range of criminality is tolerated. Your texts are welcome, 80295.